Welcome to episode 217 of Come On You Reds, the definitive Toronto FC podcast. Gareth Wheeler with you for another week of TFC talk alongside my main man, Terry Dunfield. We're both regrouping. It was a late night on Tuesday, the latest quote-unquote home game in Toronto FC history. They fall in the CONCACAF Champions League first leg to Cruz Azul. We'll get into that. TFC with a new DP. Welcome to T.O. Yeferson Soteldo. We're going to dive deep into what this player is all about with the director of scouting from Toronto FC, Jack Dodd, with his, I guess it's every 2 years he pays us a visit on this podcast. Really looking forward to that coming up. And where did Toronto FC go from here? 5 games into the new season, some of our initial thoughts, initial impressions of what this group looks like and what to make of them. How you doing, Terry? Did you get a good night's sleep last night?
To be honest, no. Same as you. By the time I crashed out, had a sandwich, it was like 2 a.m, and then all of a sudden the day started and you're getting after it. And yeah, just, you've got lots of blue Cruz Azul heads running through Cruz Azul guys running through your head. And it's been a weird kind of day so far.
Right. It's been a weird start of the year for Toronto FC, in fairness. They played 5 games in 5 stadiums, and 3 of those games have been quote unquote at home. Have you ever seen a team go through that before? Like, I know Toronto FC have started seasons when the renovations were happening to BMO Field back in the day. There was spells of 5-6 straight games away from home, but these are supposed to be games where you have an advantage and you're playing in a cup competition. Last night, playing in an NFL football stadium, Raymond James, it just made for a very difficult situation for Toronto FC to start the season. I'm not making excuses. I'm just bringing it up because it's been odd and awkward.
Yeah, it's funny, and that's the mantra of the first team and Chris Armas. He's not going to make any excuses, but I think you take into consideration too, the preseason hasn't been great. Rhythm was broken up with a COVID lockdown, let's say, for a couple of weeks. You're dealing with a new manager, new tactics, and then it's difficult to find a flow when you're playing in new stadiums, and kind of having your routine for a professional soccer player is so important. You add in the heat as well. That's a lot of variables, Wheels. And then too, you're playing against some of the top sides in Liga MX, a couple of your rivals in MLS. It's a difficult stretch. And then you look at the next 5 games coming up, it doesn't get any easier.
It certainly does not. You mentioned it took you a while to, rev down after last night. Whatever you call a game, you're calling it on adrenaline, not like you're playing it, but you kind of go over the course of the night through your head moments of the match. And it's hard for me to get past 2 things that happened last night to Toronto FC, Terry, which kind of set the tone and ended up leading to their downfall, at least last night. One was the early goal in the 3rd minute. What a strike by Angulo. Not much you can do on that. Just hit it picture perfect, bend, good power on it. But when you concede 3 minutes in against a team that's so well versed, the first place team in the Clausura in Liga MX, that will make for a difficult night. And then it was defending set pieces. And Chris Armas spoke about it post-match. He was honest. He's like, things need to get better. We need to find solutions. We're going to work away at that. But you could feel his frustration post-game. Those are the 2 things that stand out to me more than anything else from that 3-1 loss. What say you?
Yeah, I agree. I think conceding that early is a difficult one to get over, especially when you're playing against a side that in 18 games this year have conceded just 10 goals. You know it's going to be tough to score against them. And I think they surprised me a little bit how they started. I know the goal comes from a giveaway and it's a sweet strike. But I didn't expect Cruz Azul to really be on the front foot the way they were. I thought they pressed TFC well, and it took maybe TFC 20 minutes to really get into their rhythm. I agree on the set pieces one. Every time there was a set piece and there was lots of free kicks and corners, you just kind of go, oh, this could be trouble. And they kept exposing areas in the near post. We get away with one on VAR as well. And you've got to be careful because this can quickly become an Achilles heel. We conceded against Montreal, we conceded against Vancouver, and a couple last night, and that's not a good feeling. And we're a big enough side that this shouldn't be an issue. But when you're playing against a top side like Cruz Azul, the last thing you want to do is give them a gift like that first goal and 2 set pieces.
So, Terry, we see top teams across world football struggle at set pieces from time to time, whether it be taking them, whether it be defending them. How do you train? How do you make adjustments as a team, as a player over the course of your career when you know that, your current organization or the way that you're defending these or approaching them is clearly a problem?
Yeah, I'd probably do a little bit of a SWOT analysis on my group and go, okay, what are my strengths? And what jumps off the page to me is you've got Zavaleta and Omar, who are 2 towers. So, okay, let's set them up at the top of the 6-yard box, which makes sense. You've got Josie Altidore, he'll defend that near post space. But it was almost like that space in front of that line was what was causing issues. And normally in that role, when you're a little bit zonal, when you're in that line ahead of the big boys, your job's to just block runs and almost protect space. But it seemed as though there was a ton of space, and maybe it's going to be a hybrid of the two. Maybe it's a little bit man on man and zonal. I think you can kind of find that sweet spot. Whereas right now it's very zonal, or you can go the full other way and bring accountability into it and go, okay, we're full man on man. He's my guy, you're my, and I've got to deal with you. If I don't, that's on me. And you just keep one guy in that near post space. Another option might be to leave 3 guys up the field and say, okay, Cruz Azul, how are you going to defend these 3 guys? And you just have less bodies in the box because they're going to have to keep guys back.
The thing with something like this, it's correctable, is it not?
Yeah, it is, but it quickly can be jumped on, and sides start to gain confidence from that. If I'm scouting and I see, ooh, TFC are a little bit soft on set pieces, I'm going to spend more time in training leading up to that game and put a real emphasis on set pieces. It is correctable, yeah.
The other aspect of it, you said on the broadcast last night, foul less, give up less opportunities. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword when you're playing that much more aggressive in terms of your style of play. Inevitably, you are going to foul more. So you're going to have to be able to defend better.
Yeah, great point. And we're a little bit behind on the fitness side, which leads to kind of grabbing shirts and making sure you're finishing challenges and not really defending 1v1 like how you should or textbook wise. So, and our system, you're isolated at times and players don't want to be beat, which leads to fouls. So yeah, that's a good point as well.
I thought that, and sometimes you just need to tip your cap. Sometimes when your team doesn't play up to standard, it has something to do with the way the other team played. I thought Cruz Azul defended Toronto FC very well over the course of the night. No one had time. No one had space. They kept TFC guessing. TFC's points of the game when they had the most joy were when they forced Cruz Azul into mistakes coming out of the back and went the other way. We saw that with Justin Morrow pinching, leading to Jonathan Osorio's goal. But this is an experienced Cruz Azul team, and I think you got to give them a lot of credit for making TFC feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. And they almost suffocated TFC a little bit. Yes. They really had a lot of density in the middle of the field, never really gave TFC a sec to set up attacks. Neither center back had time and space on the ball. And watching Cruz Azul, it was a little bit different from what I saw leading up to that game, where they kind of would find their structure and sit in a 4-5-1, and there's little space between the lines, and they were compact. And then Romo would set that press off, where as soon as they lost possession, they almost TFC at the Chris Armas way. And I thought after 20 minutes, TFC kind of sharpened up, and the guys found a way through that first wave. And when they did, it led to a couple of half chances.
We'll discuss a little bit more later on about what the 3-1 result means for Toronto FC over the course of the next week. It is a bye week. They're going to be making that trip to the Azteca. They need to go there and score at least 3 goals. It's going to be a difficult task for Toronto FC to say the least next week. But the game on the field wasn't the only element of excitement for Toronto FC over the course of this week. There's the alligator at training, which has made headlines worldwide. The signing of Ali Gator, Not bad. Well done by the TFC content team. I had a good laugh, and I'm the king of the dad jokes, so I know a good dad joke. But the big one was Toronto FC announcing a new designated player, the signing of 23-year-old Venezuelan winger, Yeferson Soteldo. He's dynamic. He's 5'2". He comes to Toronto FC from Santos. He fills that role that was vacated by Pablo Piatti in the offseason and gives Toronto FC another difference maker in attack. What do you make of this signing? I know you were buzzing yesterday about this signing. It's like you got a new haircut or a new jacket or something like that. Now you got a new player to watch, Terry.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I think it's exactly what TFC need right now. And he's a difference maker. He's got experience at just 23. He's played close to 230 games or so. He's a 1-in-5 goal scorer, but he can change a game in a second. I think there's a huge upside to him. I think he's fighting to really lock a spot in that Venezuelan national team. He's almost that 12th man right now, and it's kind of cool that he sees that TFC is the place where I can keep pushing my career. And I'm sure he has aspirations to maybe get to Europe one day. But the fact that we're the next stop on his journey is fantastic. From what I understand, the economics are excellent, and an opportunity presented itself. I'm interested to hear what Jack Dodd has to say about him. But from what I've seen on tape, he's very clever. He's got wonderful technique. Whatever he's thinking, he can execute. He's great in tight spaces. I'd say in transition, he's super dynamic, and he can go either way. And he's got that short Giovinco backlift where he can generate so much power when he strikes the ball. Also, which will help us, good on set pieces, penalty taker as well.
You mentioned Jack. Without further ado, let's welcome in our guest to dig deeper into Toronto FC's newest player. A special guest joining us on this week's podcast, Terry. It's rare. I think we get this gentleman on once every 2 years. We end up, trying to track him down because he's the VIP of all VIPs when it comes to Toronto FC. And I still maintain one of the coolest jobs in this industry. He is the director of scouting for Toronto FC, Mr. Jack Dodd, joining us here on Come On You Reds. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Hello, Gareth. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you.
You do have a cool job, don't you?
I do like it. Yeah.
Watching plenty of football. Over the pandemic, Jack, I've really got knee deep into Football Manager. So perhaps I should just fire off my resume based upon my team performances. Is that how it works?
I reckon over the years I've learned like how to pronounce certain names and things like that, where players are, all sorts from that game. It was I think for me, it was a great grounding in terms of as a kid growing up playing that and going on to doing what I'm doing. Could have done worse.
We always love having you on, and it's appropriate timing this week with an exciting new addition to the Toronto FC family and designated player Yeferson Soteldo linking up with the team. I believe he's now on the ground in the United States, and we look forward to seeing him in action with Toronto FC. When you're scouting worldwide to determine what type of player to bring in, whether it's a designated player or anyone else, I mean, there are plenty of players to choose from, all different types, all different strengths and weaknesses. But what made Yeferson the right player for this group, Jack?
Yeah, I think in terms of narrowing down, the broad scope of players that you could bring in, especially when you're dealing with higher budgets and things like that, it's important that you have a profile that you work from and that you're, that profile is determined by the club being clear on what it needs. And so once you're clear on those things, it's about going out and making sure that you are providing the right options for what will make the club better. It obviously takes us to different corners of the globe. It takes us to different leagues, different competitions, different cultures, and it throws up lots of different kind of challenges along the way. But I think, again, as long as you can kind of anchor yourself in being clear about what is going to make the team better, then it's always the best kind of starting point and the best thing to come back to as and when you feel like you've identified somebody that might be a candidate.
Thanks again, Jack, so much for taking the time. Maybe before we kind of get right in, I guess it is in your realm, But could you give us an overview of what the market's like through COVID, the transfer market in itself?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? Because I think on some ends you have the teams at the top end that everyone's impacted, obviously, but they can still spend huge amounts of money. And so the trickle-down effect of that is that, if X player costs this, then Y player should cost this in an agent's eyes or a selling club's eyes and things like that. But then at the same time, you've got the selling clubs maybe impacted to a degree where they might have an idea of what they want to accept, but they simply can't hold out for it too long. And so it leads to a bit of a kind of cat and mouse game in terms of, you have an idea of what a player would have cost. Do you automatically say, okay, we'll work on a rule of say 2/3 and just, we'll go in and say we'll pay 5 million instead of 8 million because we think we can, when the check's on the table, maybe a club is going to say, okay, look, we need the money bad enough that we're not going to hold out for extra or whatever it is. But it's definitely thrown up a bunch of different wrinkles. Obviously, the big one is live scouting and what you're able to do in stadiums, or right now what you're not able to do in stadiums, and how you get around that. And with Jefferson, for example, we fall back on the fact we've seen him start of 2020 live when we were doing some of the coverage of the pre-Olympic under-23 tournament in South America. So you've checked that box. In an ideal world, once it was kind of identified that he was the guy, we'd have gone down and spent at least 2 games worth, maybe more of brushing up on what we knew on him in stadium with myself, with Ali, maybe Bill, maybe Chris if he was available, other members of the scouting staff, that kind of thing, which is just not open to us at the moment. The travel restrictions plus not being able to get into stadiums. And so, it means you double down on video. It means you double down on data, make sure that everything that you have on a player is cross-checked, and maybe you utilize more people within the club to watch them. I mean, in this instance, the new coaching staff came in and we were kind of talking them through the process of how we scout here whilst they were kind of getting their feet under the table. But as part of that, what was really good is how curious they were and how much they then went away and consumed in terms of video. And, maybe even one blessing that came from the COVID outbreak that we had at the club is that the coaching staff were back confined to hotel rooms and had plenty of time to watch plenty of video of players. So, yeah, really, it's been a challenge for sure. But there's I think you just make the most of it and find ways around it where possible.
You mentioned some of the background there about, some of the scouting that you did do on Jefferson, but how long has he actually been on your radar for before you ended up signing the player? And how does a player like that end up on your radar in the first place?
In his instance, it was really because we cover, like I would imagine most MLS teams are the same. We cover the U20 tournaments, particularly in South America. Obviously, it's a rich market for talent in terms of players coming from there to MLS. And as the league grows, it seems the intention will be a lot of those players will use MLS as the step to Europe instead of going straight over. But so for Jefferson, it was really a case of we were early 2017, the U20 South American tournament, where we first had eyes on him. And that Venezuelan team then obviously went on to qualify for the U20 World Cup that year, continued to monitor that team and him through that tournament where they made the final. And obviously he was a key component of that. And that kind of solidifies him as a young player that we want to keep track of after that. So, yeah, so really it was following him through then 2018, which was the back end of his time in Chile club football, and then on to Santos at Brazil. And obviously by that point, he's into DP territory in terms of what he would have cost us moving forward. And so, yeah, it really is then we keep guys like him on lists that once the profile matches that particular player, it's like, okay, that's an option for us now. The budget is right, the type of player we need is right, and we know that we've tracked this guy through 10 to 20 games already and we like what we've seen. Let's dig down into a bit more individual stuff, data stuff, and see if he comes out the other side as our preferred option.
No wonder I never got signed at the end of my career. That's quite the MOT on the player. You can't just score a worldie and think you're going to get a move.
That's it, yeah. It's probably not enough data for me back then, Terry, either.
that probably saved me. Interesting stuff.
He's such an interesting player, but he's anything but typical. He's 5'2". I mean, you think of Morales from New York City. I believe he was 5'2.5". João Plata, I believe, is the smallest player, former Toronto FC man, at 5'2" as well. I told Terry this story. I remember the first time that I met João Plata. It was at a training camp in Charleston, South Carolina. And I was going to cover the team for the Sun newspaper at the time. And the elevator opened up. And I saw someone wearing Toronto FC gear. And I actually thought that Plata was a child of one of the players. I was like, someone brought their family along.
Oh,
he was just, no, because he was very, very young at that time as well. I can't make that up. But then it turned out I saw him on the training pitch and he was absolutely brilliant. So does the fact that he is 5'2", does it raise any red flags for scouts, or do your analytics and the talent maybe tell a little bit of a different story?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, I think had he not played at the level he's played at in terms of what he did at U20 level, particularly with the national team, and then what he's gone on and done with Santos, both domestically and particularly in Copa Libertadores, where, you know, you're like, one of the things that we looked at with Brazil, for example, is it's a league. So I talk with Tiago, who covers Brazil for TFC as our scout often. That they have talked about, for example, introducing a rule there where teams can only fire so many coaches in a year. That level of kind of in and out with coaching leads to a level of pragmatism in terms of the style of football that is kind of at odds with what we think we know about Brazilian football. And I think through that, the style of football is defensive. It's quite kind of cynical in terms of how many fouls and stuff like that. And so for me, looking at him and his size, it kind of didn't really matter. Once you can handle it in that league at that level, with that level of kind of defensive scrutiny, I suppose, that's given to the difference makers, for me, it doesn't leave any red flags when it comes to playing MLS. No.
Right. And obviously he's going to draw direct comparables to Sebastian Giovinco. Shifty player, good on the ball, can finish, can set up goals as well. Is that a fair comparison at all?
I mean, I'm not sure it's fair to compare anyone to Seba, is it really?
No.
I mean, in terms of skill set, there's obviously some similarities. In terms of stature, there's some similarities. In terms of little things like low center of gravity and being quite powerful with it, right? There's some similarities there. I wouldn't want to put pressure on an incoming signing by saying, hey, we think you can go and do that.
Can he get there?
Maybe that's on us as a club to help develop him. That's on him, and if he can, then fantastic. But for me, I mean, we're talking about I still believe the best player that's played in this league, certainly in my time, and I wouldn't want to put that on any new signing as, hey, we think you can go do that now. It'd be great if you got halfway there. I think we'd get our money's worth at least.
Well, it's interesting because this player's 23, right? Like this new younger designated player, it's a different scenario because Giovinco came into this league as an established international playing for Juventus, right? So I know it's a little bit different. I'm more thinking like in terms of role in the team. Is he someone that can play underneath in Altidore? Is he more of an out and out winger? Like, because based upon profile, it seems like he can play a similar role. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't rule it out. Yeah, I think based on, again, from the time we've watched him, I think we saw him. I went through our reports just before the call. I think we have about 20-something reports on him. And through that, I would say 75% of the time he's played off the left wing. More so at youth national team level, played as a second forward. So we know he can do it. We've seen him as a 10 for Santos, so we know he can do that as well. So instances like now, for example, where Pozuelo is out, yeah, there's probably an opportunity for him to play the 10 spot as well. So yeah, there's definitely some similarity in that respect. I think I would say, again, one of the things that we valued in him, that I think Chris values in the outside guys, in terms of the wingers or outside midfielders or however you want to refer to those, is that if we want to get bodies around the ball and things like that, we're going to have guys that are inside quite often. If we win the ball back, they need to be able to play inside because that's the position they're going to be in when they receive the ball potentially. But obviously sometimes in kind of more set attack when we're building out, we might have where the fullback is inverted and the higher wide guy is wide. And so it was important to Chris, I think, that we had someone who could do both things, could play underneath and could play wide and do that out of the same role within the team, just at different moments in the game. And that was a check in the box for Soteldo as well, for sure.
Jack, looking back through those 20 reports, what would you say are the 3 things that stood out to you that really are like, okay, yeah, this is why we're going to go for him?
For me, it was, first things first, he's brave, and he's brave in a way that like he's willing to express himself. And I don't think he's worried about if he makes a mistake. He's not worried to give the ball away. He's not worried if something he tries doesn't come off, because in continually wanting to get on the ball and continue wanting to be a protagonist and be a difference maker, I think he has enough quality on top of that to then make things happen. And I like the fact that if he makes a mistake, it just doesn't seem to sit on him at all. If he gets yelled at by a teammate, it doesn't seem to weigh on him at all. He'll go again, get the ball again, go at the fullback again. And that for me was, it's a constant through the things that we'd seen. And it's probably the thing I like the most about him as well.
Interesting.
We need to.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
I did duck that a little bit. So if I drag the first answer out here, I can avoid answering number 2 and 3. I think quickness is another one. I think he's very fast. When he gets going, he can really open up, and he can do it with the ball at his feet. You know, there's not a lot of players that can travel at pace with the ball at their feet almost as quickly as they can without it. I think he has the ability to do that. And then the other thing, again, linked to what he can do 1v1 is it's his kind of change of direction. It's very, very quick. So again, if you can face up a defender, go one way and push off the other direction and do it faster than they're able to do it whilst you've got the ball at your feet, that's a big advantage. And he seems comfortable. He's right-footed, but he seems comfortable going to his left, which gives defenders, kind of that guessing game. It's hard to second guess what he's going to do next. So there's your other 2, Terry.
I'm very interested in the South American market in general. This is the second Venezuelan player brought into Toronto FC now. And typically you see players from nations outside the power nations in South America, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, players from Ecuador and Peru and Venezuela typically go to Liga MX, but now they're landing in Major League Soccer. Has there been a shift in terms of quality with some of these smaller nations producing some really intriguing talent? And what do you make of the priority of finding those players and bringing them to MLS like so many clubs are doing now?
Yeah, there is. I think there has been a shift. Again, if you saw Venezuela U20s through that World Cup that Soteldo played in, I think we're a marker that, a nation that size can put a group of players together, age group football, and go all the way to the World Cup final. And I think that was an indicator of where some of the smaller nations in South America are going as well. I think in this instance, obviously, it always gives you some assurance if they've gone on and played in one of those powerhouse leagues, as you mentioned, right? So to be able to go and out of Venezuela, then to go to Chile, it shows he's able to move to other countries, he's able to adapt. Obviously, this is going to be his first English-speaking country. But, we have plenty of Spanish speakers within the group and within the staff and that kind of thing too, to help with the transition. But it shows he's moved away from home. He can live away from home at a young age. He's adapted to other countries, other teams, other styles of play. And then he's gone on to do it, at Brazil, at Santos, where in the number 10, we've heard all about, players who've worn that shirt before and so on. And that he's done that, and then he's gone and done it in kind of the premier competition in South America in Copa Libertadores, and was a key part of a team that made the final last year as well. So I think it's always, you have to be wary in some instances. Some of the domestic leagues aren't still that strong, and so when you take a player from one of those domestic leagues directly, you have to be probably more wary of the transition in terms of level than maybe you would be for a guy like Soteldo, who, again, if you're investing this level of, DP investment, I think you want some of those boxes checked that he's played outside of the smaller nations already. He's played at a bigger club. He's been a key guy in one of those teams and that kind of. Last
question from me, Jack, but did you speak to Gallardo about him at all?
I didn't because there's a small language barrier there, but I believe either Ali or Chris had checked in with him, and we go to, particularly again with the higher the spend, typically the broader amount of work we will dig in, obviously, just to reduce the risk. And with this, we spoke with coaches he's worked with in the past. We spoke with an assistant coach at Santos. We spoke with the current national team coach for Venezuela, and everybody we spoke to came back with fairly consistent feedback. And obviously him and Ericsson are friends from growing up. One of the reasons maybe, I didn't necessarily prioritize speaking with Ericsson is you're probably going to get a biased point of view from his best mate, right?
Right.
It's like me asking Gareth if you're any good at broadcasting, Terry. He's probably getting.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, true. That's probably a bad example. Yeah,
it's a good workout carrying 160 pounds on my back every day. So,
I'll take 160.
Typically speaking, the feedback we got was good. That he's a tactically curious guy. He will speak and engage with the coaches. He wants to learn. He wants to get better. Respectful, family guy. Good life off the field, good teammate, all those things. Everything came back fairly consistent and fairly positive. So yeah, we were pleased with that as well.
We cannot wait to see him play. I think we have a pretty good feel of what to expect, the background on Yeferson. Before we let you run, let's discuss TFC, because obviously there was a consistent head coach for Toronto FC for 6 years and a consistent style of playing under Greg Vanney. A new coach comes in Chris Armas. He has his own ideas about the way he wants to shift things, play in a little bit of a different way. Does that change your job and the job of the scouting staff at all in terms of who you're scouting and how you're scouting?
Doesn't change how we're scouting really, but it changes who. Yeah, I think so. The process is able to stay fairly consistent. I think, where we cover, what we cover, how we cover it, the due diligence we would go through on signings that we would make, all of that stays the same. I think what changes is, obviously you have to reacquaint yourself with the new coaching staff, what they see as important in terms of the way they want to play, and particularly how that filters down to individual attributes on a kind of per position basis. And those things will be slightly different with this group than it was from the previous group. And then obviously it's then us as a department, acquainting ourselves with those attributes on a per player basis, then going into the shortlist that we keep on the different regions we cover and really tweaking those. And as we're kind of going back, typically through the early part of the year, once this window is coming to a close, as we go back to kind of broaden our horizons, just going back to general scouting and looking at what's out there before we get into position specific stuff later in the year, just being cognizant of those things, the things that this group are looking to add to the team from a tactical perspective, and how that impacts, what we look at, how we record what we see and those kind of things. And then how we shortlist players so that once we go into summer window or next off season, that the players that we pick from, when we know what the profile is that we're looking for, are kind of appropriate to the way that the team wants to play now.
That must be quite exciting. It's a lot of work shifting like that, but I think all of us in our jobs, like that little bit of a different challenge from time to time.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I have to say credit to Chris as well. Through the early part of this season, he was very open in terms of allowing me to sit in on some of the tactical stuff he did through preseason with the team while I was in the facility and they were still in Toronto and things like that. That was good because it really helped me learn. And then I've worked with him and a couple of the coaches on some of the position specific stuff, translate that to our group and we go from there. But yeah, Chris has been really open in terms of making that transition as easy as possible.
We just have a couple minutes left. I know that all TFC fans will be like, okay, what's next? Who are you looking at, Jack? And obviously you're not going to give away state secrets, but what I'm intrigued by is maybe what's next, not just for Toronto FC, but you and the scouting team in terms of the to-do list, whether it's an area of the world or an aspect in terms of scouting that intrigues you, might be something that TFC can take advantage of or look more into as the team continues to grow and evolve.
A few things, I suppose. I mean, as a department head, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that we're always trying to stay on the front foot in terms of innovation and in terms of just making sure that we're following best practices and making sure that the quality of our work and the diligence of our work is always kind of as good as it can be. That includes where we could expand into looking and things like that. Obviously, that has to be balanced against the resource we have, and COVID doesn't help. It's hard for me to go to Ali and Bill and say, hey, give me another X amount of money to hire 2 new scouts or something like that right now. So, as it stands, we make do with what we have. And we've had a group that's, in terms of staff, has been together now for probably about 3 years without any changes, which has been great in terms of continuity. The guys are really clear on how we want to work and the processes and the expectations as well. And that really helps in terms of going through times like this where you can't necessarily grow, but taking a group of guys who are willing to be flexible and willing to try different things. And maybe during COVID, we had one or two guys break away from their markets while they were on pause and go look at other areas of the world where football was still happening. So, we dipped into South Korea and Japan when they restarted because they were ahead of the curve in terms of getting games back on and things like that. And I think data is still a huge part of recruitment. It's growing in terms of importance. It continues to grow. It continues to evolve in terms of what is considered important and how accurate it can be. And obviously we work closely with Arthur, who's kind of a designated data scout for us, and Devin Plula, who's head of analytics with the club. And find ways we can maximize what we can do. Is there more we can do with physical data? Is there more we can do with tracking data on players and the ground they cover during games, and then combining that with some of the event data that we get? And there's a lot left to be improved on, and that's probably across the board in terms of scouting and recruitment at clubs all over the world. But I think for us, we want to try and make sure that we're at the forefront of that, particularly in MLS especially. I think I hope that if we're doing this well, that this is an area where the club can really take advantage and be better than other clubs and help what we achieve on the field ultimately.
Very good. The track record speaks volumes, so kudos to you and your team. And I know I can speak on behalf of Terry. I believe that we're just excited to see where this thing goes from here. And there'll probably be some sleepless nights for you and the rest of the front office before, Soteldo does play that first game, whether it's next week or the week after. There's going to be a lot of excitement from the fan base and internally as well. So thanks so much for doing this, Jack. This is great. Top man.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Cheers, guys.
Jack Dodd, Director of Scouting for Toronto FC, joining us on Come On You Reds. Terry, how good was that? A lot of good intel from the man with his finger on the pulse with Toronto FC.
What a fun job, eh? Super articulate, lots of layers to it. The fact that we've probably seen Soteldo play 20 times. We've seen him live, tons of due diligence. And as you said, Wheels, the proof is in the pudding. Look how many trophies TFC have won since Jack's come to the club.
Yeah, I just like how this isn't a signing based on a whim. Like, I think that sometimes you need to pull back the curtain and talk to the people that are making these decisions, that are gathering the information and figuring out what will work for this team and what won't. And I think that if you listen back to that interview, or if you obviously just listened or watched it on YouTube, you'll learn something. I think that gives you a lot of confidence as a fan and builds the excitement for potentially next week.
Yeah. And I'd say two Wheels, like an insight, a nice overview to really what the scouting world is like, what the day-to-day is like. I thought it was really interesting.
So here's the $1 million question. Do you play Soteldo next week at the Azteca Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time on One Soccer? I mean, by all accounts, and obviously things can change based upon medical protocol and whether a player is ready or not, he has been playing regular football. This is a player that is in shape and should be ready to go. His quarantine should expire sometime over the weekend as well, as he's entered the United States. Do you just kind of let him go out there and express himself in a game where obviously the odds are against you and you're playing against the top side? I know that I'm anxious to see him play. Would you start him?
Ooh, good question. I think there's three answers. Number one, you start him.
Three answers.
Number two, you protect him a little bit and maybe bring him off the bench. And number three would be you wait for the right moment where he's really going to succeed. And he's up against the right fullback or center back, and there's going to be a ton of space. I will probably go somewhere in the middle and say maybe 30, 40 minutes off the bench in the second half. Let him start to feel the Chris Armas way. Depends also how much training he's had under his belt. But yeah, I'd probably say bring them on after maybe 50, 55 minutes.
I feel like top players want to just get in and play, right? And you want to play big teams in an historic stadium like the Azteca. I don't know. For me, it's going to be kind of difficult to not unleash the beast next week. I don't know. That's just my feel. It might not be, the smartest decision. I don't know what the mindset is, and I'm not sure where the player will be at, but he's got to be itching to be back out there. And I'm just looking ahead to next week. And yeah, it's improbable for Toronto FC to advance, but it's not impossible. I think that TFC really missed Richie Larea, who was out through suspension. They just don't have another player like him at right back. And I think that he keeps the opponents honest as well. And I thought that the night was rather straightforward for the Cruz Azul back line. Once you add that other layer of Larea coming forward, working up that speed and getting down the right-hand side, it changes things. We might see Mavinga next week for the first time. Azorio and Altidore and Akinola, another week of training as they're trying to get back to full fitness, because they most certainly weren't at full steam last night. And who knows how far Pozuelo's off. So we can potentially see a much different looking Toronto FC side next week.
You could. And that New York Red Bulls game rolls around quite quickly. My heart says I'd love to see all these guys. My head's kind of saying it's a tough one. And, is it maybe another opportunity for some of our academy boys? And you almost shift your priority a little bit more to the league. I don't think Chris Armas will go that way. I think he'll follow maybe your train of thought. I agree. I thought Richie Larea was missed. I thought Markey really missed him on the right-hand side and him overlapping and getting forward. I thought we were more of a threat down the left-hand side. And I thought there was almost like a shift. Like we were very narrow at times. I know Chris Armas wants minimal width, but there's got to be a little bit of width. And it was almost as though our left side was pretty good, but it almost shifted our right side where he saw Markey off the field and he wasn't kind of right on the sideline and he wasn't kind of on that inside channel, and Auro was kind of underneath them at times. They were on the same line, and it's a little bit different when Larea plays. I think Pozuelo's been a big miss.
Of course.
And kind of where I'm going with that is I think everyone right now is the guys are trying to figure out the system. And when you're doing that, you kind of look after yourself. And with say Michael Bradley, for example, I think he's been exceptional, but his focus right now is on Michael's game. I don't know if you'd agree with that. And under Greg Vanney, it was almost like he was that coach on the field, and he controlled everything. He controlled the tempo. He controlled the engagement line. He controlled how TFC built. He controlled where TFC switched the point of attack. Whereas right now, everything is the same tempo. I don't know what you think. I think it's 100 miles an hour, and maybe this is what Chris wants, but it's a tough way to play that way. And I think when Pozuelo comes into the team, he might be able to just control the tempo of the attacks.
Well, that's the thing. And we mentioned on last night's broadcast, there were some parts during the game. TFC ended up having 55% of possession, but I was just like, you just need to keep the ball for a little bit. I know that you want to push forward and there's these lines of attack and you want to attack at speed, but I think the distribution was a little bit sloppy and you really missed that quality, that threat that Pozuelo possesses, because he can play that ball in behind and keep the back line honest, but you need to be able to respect them as well. So I think that he can be a little bit more tidy on the ball, Terry. One of the positives for me last night, I thought it was another really solid game from Ralph Priso in the middle of the park. He continues to impress. I think there's a real important role in this team this season for Priso. Yeah,
I thought it was outstanding. I thought before the game, Chris Armas said, look, you're going to have a role. You've got to protect space, be a screen for our center backs. And I thought there was a ton of numbers for Cruz Azul in that area. And I thought he protected space when he needed to. When he could step and win duels, he did. He looked strong. I think his fitness is getting better. His passing after the first 15 minutes improved. And by the way, with so much density in the middle of the field, those gaps were tiny and he was still finding a way to play forward. I thought it was great. And after the game, I thought KJ was just a touch harsh on him. I thought, again, it was another solid performance from him. And that's just the type of player he is. He's not going to be a difference maker. But if he can become a reliable player, he can have a great career. And just to that last point that you said, Wheels, I know we got to move on here, but we want everything all at once always, don't we? We want to Red Bull Leipzig right away. We want to see Liverpool. And this is like the vision that Chris Harmis has for TFC. But it takes time. And I think our focus has been on getting the press right, being aggressive out of possession. And maybe he hasn't spent a whole bunch of time. Okay, what do we look like in possession? And conceding early meant we were going to now have a lot of the ball in the way Cruz Azul plays. And I just don't think we spent a whole bunch of time there. And that was maybe highlighted last night, plus us missing some of our key attackers.
The other thing that Armis said that I made note of is just that urgency in and around the area. He continues to preach it in training. You give up 3 goals, on Tuesday night. You give up 2 to Vancouver, 4 to Montreal. It's just there needs to be more defensive urgency. Both goals against Vancouver, we haven't really talked about it. One was off a short set piece, and the other one was off a very good service off a set piece as well. So it's a recurring problem. There needs to be more urgency defensively. And once they solve that, the game's going to come much easier for them. And let's wait to I know we're 5 games in and we're always wanting to assess and analyze and grade. How are things going? It's incomplete. We don't know what this team's going to look like until all of these players get back on the field and healthy. So I'm still waiting for that, Terry.
Yeah, I agree with you. Your barometer is normally 10 games. So we're halfway there now. And then I think you can go, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we need. I like these combinations. So I don't think we need to jump to conclusions just yet. I agree.
I look across at MLS, and coaches have said it before. We saw the Seattle Sounders struggle with the Champions League, the early play last season. Philadelphia Union have 1 draw in their games, and they've gone on and in league play as well. So it's just one of these things. It adds that extra layer. Playing in cup competition out of the gate certainly is more complicated with the new coach and players coming in and players being hurt. So I'm going to preach patience here a little bit, because we have seen a couple of very good performances and some real positives from this team as well, namely with the young players coming in. I don't want to say that this tie is done and dusted, because there is the Cruz Azul curse. They haven't won a Mexican League championship in 24 years. And the last time they won was 1997. And basically what the story goes is that when they won that, one of their star strikers scored on a match-winning penalty to decide it, but he suffered a blow to his head and was forced to wipe blood away from his face before taking the spot kick. And they suggest that the blood has cursed the club, and that's why they haven't gone on to win the league yet. But this is their best chance. They can go out and match a record for points in a half season on the weekend against Tijuana. So there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that. But this curse kind of lingers over that club. And this was a team that won the first leg of the playoffs back in December, 4-0 against Pumas, and lost the second leg 4-0, and ended up being knocked out of that competition prematurely. So crazy things happen. Do you believe in curses? Is this something that you subscribe to? Is this something that you've experienced?
The only one at TFC that I kind of remember was we had this pirate, and he's still there, this pirate raccoon with one eye that kind of roams around BMO Field. But whenever you actually, it was a good curse. So whenever actually you saw this pirate raccoon, it actually led to a win. So yeah, I'd always come into the reverse
curse.
Yeah,
buddy.
like the reverse curse. I'd always look down the hall. Is that raccoon there, or can you see him? But yeah, so there's a raccoon at BMO Field. He's ran riot too. I was back a couple of weeks ago.
I live in Toronto. I'm terrified of raccoons. I don't know why. I had this recurring dream as a child that I was surrounded by hundreds of raccoons, and it was with my dad, and I'd crawl up his back to try to get away from them, and they're all like climbing up his body trying to get me. It was a recurring dream. If you're out there and you know what this dream means, please share, because it's tormented me to this day. I have problems. I have issues.
I don't know what to say to that.
I do think it's a benefit that Toronto FC have a bye week in MLS, no game this weekend, so they can focus their entire energy next week. But KJ brought it up on the One Soccer post-match show, whether Toronto FC doesn't bring some players to the Azteca. What do you think about that, Terry?
Ooh, yeah, I think it's just so hard to juggle 2 competitions, especially when you're kind of at a start of the year. One of my good friends, he coaches He's in the Canada setup with coaches Ericsson Lado. He sent me a text that said, "Look at Istanbul Başakşehir. They were in the Champions League this year,
in a group with United, PSG, and Leipzig.
Yeah, really good team over the past couple of years. They don't get out of the group stages, and now they're fourth bottom in the league, and they're in relegation. So it's tough to balance two competitions. We've seen this at TFC 2012, 2018. So I think there's something to it. There's history to it, and that's probably where my head's saying maybe leave one or two at home. And I know these guys. You said it off air that like they'll want to go out and prove themselves. You want to play as Azteca. You want to, as a player, push yourself against the best players in the world. I don't know. My head's starting to go to the league, and MLS is tough. It's tough to chase points, and it's even harder when you don't have a home field.
So it'll be another big week off the pitch for Toronto FC, just not playing games, but in terms of preparation for next week. But some good time for this team to continue to get healthy and continue to get on the same page and clean up some of these areas, set pieces that need to be rectified before things continue to progress moving forward. We'll see. Bill Manning and Ali Curtis both said publicly that they'd like to see if they can make another move or two in the coming weeks. We'll see if that's in the cards. Follow along on Toronto FC socials. They're informative. They're entertaining. They're always giving you a glimpse as to what's going on down in Florida right now. It's been good stuff by our entire team. So keep up the good work on that front. Anything else this week, Terry?
No, all good.
Good stuff, pal. Thanks again to Jack Dodd and Toronto FC for making that happen. Thanks to you, Terry Dunfield. We'll be back together next week. It's Tuesday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, pre-match show on One Soccer, the return leg, Toronto FC and Cruz Azul, and potentially the debut of Yeferson Soteldo. On behalf of Erica, our fine producer, I am Gareth Wheeler, and this has been Come On You Reds.